Hi everyone, Chef Aaliyah back again to show you another simple meal. Today I'm making chicken and rice soup. This is something that's actually a recipe on my website, but I'm taking that recipe today and just using the concept of it really because I don't have most of the ingredients in the recipe. But I'm going to make this soup anyways and it's going to be delicious. So there's three things I'm going to be talking about today specifically. With this soup that I want to be sure I get across to you. This is information that I think you can use for this recipe and anytime you're cooking. So number one, I'm going to talk about why the size of your vegetables matter. How big or small you cut them. Yes, it does matter. Not to stress about, but it definitely does matter, just so you're aware. I'm going to talk about when to add the pasta or the rice to a soup. I often have heard complaints about how people they don't like how their pasta or rice kind of poofs up once they add it. You know, that it sucks up all the liquid in a soup, becomes less of a soup. So I'm going to talk about a couple things that you can do to prevent that. And I'm also going to talk about subbing ingredients. Like I said, this recipe on my website is actually called ground turkey soup recipe with egg noodles. I don't have ground turkey. I have ground chicken today. I don't have egg noodles today. I'm using rice. I don't have the beans that the recipe calls for. What else? There's one other thing in there, but it doesn't matter. My point is that as long as I understand the technique of making the soup, I can make it with just about anything. So let's get started. The aromatics in this recipe are just garlic and onion and some herbs. I use dried herbs. You can certainly use fresh herbs if you want, but dry herbs are going to pack more of a punch. And why is that important? That's important because the soup doesn't take very long to cook at all. And so you want a flavor punch that's going to give you flavor quickly. And something like a dried herb gives you a lot of flavor quickly because they're super concentrated in flavor, right? And I'm talking about using a really high quality dried herb, not something that has been sitting on the supermarket shelf for 2 years and then on your shelf for 2 years. Dried herbs lose their essential oils pretty darn quick. So you want to be sure to get some of the freshest that you can out there. If you have any questions about that, let me know. That's kind of a whole separate class. But use some nice high quality dried herbs and vegetables. I started cutting my onion here and you can see I cut it in half and then I peeled it. And I want to be sure to do a super small dice, as small as you can manage. And why? It's because the smaller the vegetables, actually, we'll say this. The shorter cooking time, the smaller you want your vegetables. And why is that? Smaller vegetables means more surface area, meaning more flavor for your food. So there's more surface area for flavor to get pulled out of the onion. So you're getting more flavor into your soup. Think about a stew. When you're doing a stew, you put big chunks of onion and carrot in, and it cooks in the slow cooker all day for 8 hours or something. That's the time to do really nice big chunks. But when you are cooking a soup that this takes maybe 30 minutes to cook, you want to get as much surface area touching the soup as possible so that as much flavor will come out of those vegetables. So the short story is the shorter cooking time, the smaller you want your vegetables to be. That's what you need to remember. That's a technique I want you to remember. And this also allows you to work on your knife skills too. So this is the dicing an onion. I've left the root intact. I'm putting the flat end on the cutting board, and I'm taking my knife that I ran on the honing steel beforehand. And I'm just going to cut all the way down to the root, but not through the root. And then I'm going to cut the other direction. Let's see how small I can manage to make these today. Ooh, I'm doing good. So this is going to be my small dice, and then I'm going to go across. And this is, in the description you see I called it a pantry soup, and this truly is. I pulled things out of my pantry, and I include my freezer in my pantry. I had some ground chicken in there, and I thawed that before doing this. So if you had ground turkey, that would work. I love ground turkey. It's delicious. Ground chicken is kind of a nice way to switch it up. I know we all eat a lot of chicken, but using ground chicken is a kind of a fun way to do it. So that's one half of the onion. I see I got this little root bit in there, which I definitely want to be sure to get out because that won't soften. That won't be particularly fun to eat. So there's my smallish dice, right? So I'm same thing with the other half. I'm just cutting down to the root, but not through the root. And so what happens is I have these I'm fanning out the onion, basically. And then I'm going to go the other direction. Your knife needs to be sharp for this, guys. And I will talk about that in another video. And I've talked about it a lot in the past. If you're not using a honing steel, or if you don't have a knife that you like, that is something, one of the first things you need to pay attention to. If you're not happy cooking, it's probably one of the reasons might be because your knife is terrible. So get on that. You need to love your tools in order to be motivated to cook. And a knife is one of our most important tools in the kitchen, definitely. So when I get to the end, I just go around the root, toss that, and I'm going to go ahead and get these started cooking. I'm going to put it, you can see I have my pot here today. My oven's actually behind me, but today I pulled out my little portable burner. And I'm going to put it on a medium heat. I don't want it too high because I'm not really looking for the flavor of browning. If I have the heat up real high and I start browning my onions, you just get a totally different flavor profile. And that can be really good. It is actually really delicious. But for this particular soup, I'm kind of keeping the flavor light. So I'm not going to want any browning on my onions. So I'm going to do medium heat. This is olive oil. You can use butter. You can use any kind of oil you really want. And that's heated up-ish. I'm going to go ahead and put my onion in there. A nice gentle sizzle. Right? You want to hear a little bit of a sizzle when you stick it in there. I'm going to get that going while I cut the garlic. So, why does the size of our vegetables matter? For flavor, right? The shorter time you're cooking something, the smaller you want your vegetables to be cut, because that means your final dish will have more flavor. Grab a spoon, and I'm going to have my onions just softening up there, right? This is one of those easy meals, I just make it as I go. You can definitely, so talking about meal planning, I think this soup is actually better not made in advance, because I'll tell you the way you can make it in advance, but I really like this soup just made on the spot. And you can definitely meal prep some of the things in there. You can cut the onion and the garlic in advance. This is too sizzly for me. I'm putting it down. You want a gentle sizzle, not a hard sizzle. Listen to your food. It's important. Where was I? I don't remember. Anyways, so I'm going to move on to the garlic here. And you want to make sure you get off those little root ends. But we are going to do a mince on this garlic. Why? Because the soup isn't cooking for very long. And we want to get as much flavor out of this garlic as possible. Right, so I'm just going to stir this to prevent it from browning. If it is browning, I'm going to continue to turn it down. So I'm just really almost sweating these onions, not really sauteing them. Sauteing them implies a higher heat. Sweating is really cooking them. Hi Diana, how are you? Sweating them is over a lower heat, and it doesn't involve any browning. And so that's really what I want to do today. So I'm using just the garlic and onion today for the flavor, the aromatics, but you can add celery or carrots or anything like that that you have in your fridge. That works too. Today I just opted to keep it simple. So when I mince garlic, I start by just slicing it thinly across, keeping your fingers out of the way. Make sure you've got those little hard root ends off. Nobody likes to run into that when they're eating. I make a little sliced pile, and then keeping the tip of my knife on the cutting board, I go back and forth here until I get what I want in terms of size. Like I said, I'm going for a nice mince. Again, I'm going to turn this down. I listen to my food a lot. I don't know if you noticed that, guys. I'm always listening to my food. And I can tell that the heat's too high on that when the sizzles are too close together and loud. If you've never listened to your food cook, try it next time. It can tell you a lot. It can prevent you of something from burning or sticking. You can tell all that by just listening. I love it. All right. I'm getting there, nice and small. It doesn't have to be a paste, but it could if you wanted to go that far. And I'm going to get a nice little dice on here. And then because that heat isn't super high, I don't really need to worry about this garlic burning. I'm just going to put it in there and let it sweat. There we go. That is nice. You'll notice I did put some salt in there in the beginning. The salt helps layer, putting salt in at the beginning helps layer flavor. It also helps the vegetables break down faster. So if you want your vegetables to cook a little bit faster, add the salt. Especially in this kind of sauteing, sweating step. It always makes it go a little bit faster. There we go. Not too much stirring because then the stuff doesn't have a chance to sit in the pan and actually cook, right? Right. So there we go. That's cooking away. Let's talk really quick about dried herbs. So I'm going to use an herb blend I have here. It's one of my blends called Magnifico. It's basically an Italian style seasoning. That's what I'm choosing to use today. There are a lot of things in here. Parsley, basil, oregano, thyme, celery seed, garlic, granulated garlic and onion, and black pepper. Any kind of dried herb blend that you have and you like would work really great for this recipe. But I'm going to put the herbs in now because the dried herbs do need a little bit of time to bloom, as we call it. Kind of spread their flavor all around the soup, right? And it's the oil, the fat, that actually helps that happen. So it's fat that helps blend flavor to food. I know we don't usually think about fat in terms of flavor, but fat actually carries flavor. So that's part of the reason too why things that don't have a lot of fat in them will often have less flavor, because it's that flavor that helps, it's that fat that helps the flavor kind of travel around your taste buds and gives you the sensation of this is flavorful. So we always want to make sure to have enough fat in our food. It is for satisfaction in all kinds of ways. Definitely. Oh, that smells good. So my dried herbs are going. If you had some rosemary or something, that would be good. Fresh rosemary, you can add it here at the beginning, because that rosemary is a little bit woody, so it does take some time to break down. So it'd be a great time to add it now. If you had basil, oregano, whatever you want. This is looking good. Now while that's getting a bit softer, and I'm just basically looking for the onions to be translucent, and what that means is that you can see through them. They're not like solid white anymore, they take on a translucency, so you can start to see through them. And I also test that by pushing my spoon through them, and if they're soft, like if they give to the spoon, then they're just about ready, and they are getting it. So really quick, this actual recipe calls for spinach. I don't have any spinach, so I'm going to use a little bit of head of a cabbage that I had in my fridge that I found. See, this is the substitution. Other things you could have used were some kale would be good, spinach, what else? Anything? If you wanted to have added carrots to this, I know it's not a leafy green, but carrots would have been delicious. Anything that you like the flavor of, and you don't need a ton. I'm just going to use a little bit of cabbage. Cabbage can have a stronger flavor, so I'm just going to add a small amount of it in here. So I do want a little bit of something more in there. Now I'm going to just cut it into small pieces here, and I will put it in the end. Should I do a little more? Maybe a little more. Maybe that's enough. We'll leave that for now. All right. So now my onions and my garlic are soft, and I'm going to go ahead and add my broth. So I have some chicken broth here that I made that I really needed to use up as well. That's part of the reason I'm making this soup today too. A pantry soup, right? So if you just have a boxed chicken broth, that's totally fine, or a veggie broth, if you want to use that. If you have a homemade one, that's great too. I'm going to turn it up high because I want this to come to a boil as soon as possible. So there we go. I have my broth in there. I just turn it up, right? Yes. What was I going to say? Anything? There we go. I do prefer to use kind of a higher quality stock, either a homemade, or you can get some really nice ones in the freezer section these days, because the quality is better, the flavor is better. So if you're not making your own stock yet, I will do that on another call. I will do that on another live. But this was basically, I make my stock in the slow cooker. There's a lot of ways to do it. Some people use Instapots, which are awesome because you can have stock in like 30 minutes or 45 minutes. But I do mine in the slow cooker. So basically I just put all my chicken bones that have a little bit of meat on them and stuff, I stick them in the slow cooker and I just let it go all day on low. And by the end of the day, I strain it and I have chicken broth. It's like super duper hands off, except that sometimes I'll have to add a little bit more water because the water will evaporate. So what I tend to do is kind of save up all the bones over time from chicken carcasses and then shove them in the freezer. And then once I have a nice little pile, I will put them in the slow cooker, cover it with water, let it go all day. I don't actually add any vegetables until the last 30 minutes to an hour of cooking. You can either not add vegetables at all to your stock, or you can add them, but I would just do it at the end. If you cook vegetables for 8 hours in the slow cooker, they will turn to mush, and they will basically make your stock a soup, because it will be full of all this kind of sediment from the vegetables. So what I prefer to do is just keep it meat, and then at the very end, I'll add all the veggies and aromatics and stuff. So, oh, my other thing I do for this stock, I always add a little bit of acid, and I use apple cider vinegar. That apple cider vinegar helps the bones break down faster, right? Which is what you want. You want those bones, that collagen, that stuff from the bones, into your stock. And to do that, acid helps break that down. So you could use lemon juice. I find apple cider vinegar works. It doesn't change the flavor too much of it at all, and it does really help the bones break down. And you can tell that the bones are breaking down after you take the, at the end of 8 hours, or however long you were able to cook it for, you'll see the bones have started to become porous, and that's a good sign. You want that stuff leaching into your food. That's where all the good, healthy stuff about broths is, right? So, this is coming to a boil. And I'm going to move on to this stuff. This is part of what makes this soup, I think, so easy. I have ground chicken here. Ground turkey works too. And I'm just going to drop, it's raw, and I'm just going to drop little spoonfuls into my soup. That easy. It takes a few seconds, but that's it. You don't have to brown this or cook this or anything. This literally can come straight out of the fridge. This isn't quite to a boil, but I'm not going to worry about it. It'll get there soon. And I'm just going to start dropping in little bits. And this is a nice, it's just different, right? Like, we don't often have soups like this that the meat is a ground meat. I mean, we have like chilies a lot of times can have that, but I'm gonna move this. Yeah, it's just a nice different thing to do here. If you wanted to, I'm thinking what else you could use. If you had fish that you cubed, ground fish really isn't a thing, but if you had fish or something that you cubed into kind of small pieces, you could do that here too. Make a fish stew. Yeah. Always thinking of all the things you can substitute, right? I'm just gonna, this is about 1 pound of meat. That was probably about 6 cups of stock. I don't know exactly. Like I said, pantry meal, just using stuff up in there. I'm not sure if you guys are commenting or not. I can see Diana. Facebook is so weird. All my Facebooks, I can never see the comments, and then I get off and everybody made a bunch of comments and I didn't answer. I didn't reply, and I like interacting with you guys. So comment, say hi if you're here. All right, I'm gonna keep going. What else? Tell me a story. So you can make this soup in advance up until this point. So after I'm done adding the chicken and it cooks for 10 or 15 minutes so the chicken is cooked, if you were not going to eat it tonight, I'm not going to eat this after the live. This is lunch. But if I wasn't going to eat this right now, I would then cool it off and store it in the fridge. I would not add the pasta or the rice at this point if I wasn't going to eat it at this point. Does that make sense? Reason being, that pasta or potatoes, you can add potatoes to this, another starch. So what I'm trying to get you to see here is that basically what the original recipe called for was egg noodles, right? But what are egg noodles? Egg noodles are starch, right? You can use quinoa in here. So you can use any kind of starch that you have in your pantry. Almost any kind. And you don't want to add it until you're ready to eat it. So if you were doing like a meal prep kind of thing, like cooking on a Sunday and eating on a Wednesday or something, I would make this soup up until this point, cool it off, and then when you're ready to eat it during the week, just pull it out of the fridge, heat it up, and then cook the pasta in there for however long the pasta cooks, 7 to 10 minutes, or the rice, 20 minutes or so. I'm using rice today. I almost bought egg noodles this week, but I didn't. But that's okay because I have some rice that's going to go perfect in this. I like using the little bits of rice. I don't know if this happens to you guys. I buy bags of rice. I always end up with this little tiny strange amount in the bottom. Like that's not enough to make a pot of rice. It's like maybe a half a cup. And I love having those little bits actually because I will then use them in soups. Because here's the thing. If you're using rice or any kind of starch, you're going to add a lot less than you think you need to. Because it really expands quite a bit. So if you want to keep this as soup and not turn it into a stew, I need at most for this amount of stock like a half a cup of rice. That's it. And it's going to be plenty in here. So just keep that in mind. The starches, they really eat up that liquid in there. So you don't want to just put in a ton feeling like, oh, I need to really fill this out. And then you just end up kind of with a bowl of soupy noodles. That's not bad. Soupy noodles are good, but they're not soup. So something to keep in mind, right? Dave, do you have a preference between chopping your garlic and pressing it? I never press my garlic because I hate cleaning presses. So I don't even own a garlic press. I think I got rid of the last one that was in this kitchen. Can't stand garlic presses. What I usually do, which kind of gives you that press consistency, is do the grating, which you must have seen me do before. I use my microplane, and I don't know, my microplane somewhere. I use my microplane and I grate it. So that's my version of pressing it. And chopping my garlic, not really. I mean, because the grating does create more of a paste, and because I was cooking this, I didn't want it to burn. I think a paste would have burnt a little bit more than this finely chopping it would have. So I just left it at finely chopped. But if I'm doing it in like a salad or something, somewhere where I really kind of want the garlic to disappear, I will do it in the grater, which is really, it's the equivalent of a press. And like I said, everybody has different tools that work for them. And I say, don't feel pressure to use the tool you think you should. You know, for years I thought I was supposed to be using a garlic press because it was supposed to be easier, but every time I was cleaning one, I was like, I hate these because you have to get a little toothpick and poke in the little holes, and some of them have like 2 or 3 parts, and I gave that up. So yeah, whatever works for you. The press I think is going to be a bit more pasty, but either one could work for this recipe, definitely. So we're almost at a boil, and I have all these nice little bits of chicken in here, and I'm going to go ahead and you know what? I'm going to add everything in. So this cabbage, if I was using my presses bowl, there you go. There you go. So your press is your thing. I'm also not a huge fan of lots of specialized tools, only because I have a really small kitchen with limited storage space. So I use the microplane for all kinds of things, not just garlic. Whereas for the garlic press, do you use your garlic press for other things, Dave? That's what I'm curious about. So my soup is boiling. I'm turning it down. I'm going to add my cabbage now because cabbage is a bit thicker than spinach. If I was using spinach, I would put it in at the end after the soup was done. But because this cabbage is a bit thicker, it does take a little bit more time to get soft, I'm going to go ahead and put it in there with that chicken too. And you know what else I'm just going to go ahead and add? This is all going to take about the same amount of time to cook, is my rice. So I have, let's see, I didn't even look how much. I'm guessing it's about a half. It's not even a quarter cup, guys. It's so little. It's great. So I have some jasmine rice. Doesn't matter too much for this recipe what you use. Oh, minced ginger. Yep, totally. And I use my microplane for ginger too. That's really my go-to for the ginger. Maybe a quarter cup of rice here, a third of a cup. So I'm going to boil here. I'm going to go ahead and put that rice in. And then bring it down to a simmer, cover it, probably about 20 minutes, just until the rice is done. That'll be plenty of time for the chicken to cook through. And I'm actually going to go ahead and taste it now, see how salt's doing. I have a feeling I might need to add a little bit more salt. Oh no, actually, I think that broth had salt in it. So I think we're going to be pretty good on the salt. Let me turn this down. You want just a nice gentle simmer. A gentle simmer will also ensure that your chicken or turkey doesn't get super tough. If you boil meat, minced meat like this, or like a chicken breast or something, it tends to get really tough. It's better to kind of gently simmer it, and that way it stays tender, right? So I'm turning it down as much as I can and still keep it at a nice little simmer there. That's gonna go. And that's that. Like I said, if I wasn't eating this right away, I would not have added the rice or the noodles or whatever you might use. I would add that later. You could have taken it up to the point right before you added that and then put it away in the fridge and pull it out later. So I think that's it. Oh, I put a link at the bottom of this. I'm going to be teaching a class in about a month or so in February, talking about 7 simple things you can do to have light and easy dinners. Right, so I want to make sure if you guys want to come to that, the link is down below there. Take a look at that, and I will see you guys next time. All right, thanks. Bye.